We can't, we'll maybe fuzz you or something.
Yeah, modify me, maybe, I would say put dark in my hair, but it's been too long.
Okay. Okay, well, let's, I know you guys have busy schedules, so I don't want to hold you up. So I want to, my name is Stephen Blank, and I'm the editor and publisher of Blank Slate Media. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our virtual debate between State Senator Anna Kaplan and former Port Washington Police Commissioner Dave Franklin, who are opposing each other in a race for the 7th Senate District in New York. I'm joined today here by Rob Pelez, our social media manager and a reporter for the paper. And we have a lot to get going. So why don't we start off we're going to start off with a opening statement of 3 minutes by each of you. Anyone care to go first?
Ladies first, I'll be a gentleman.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start. I just want to warn our candidates that unlike the presidential debates, I have a mute button. So
Good.
Keep that in mind. I'm sure we will we'll not have to use that. So, but Anna, can you please give us your opening statement?
Thank you, Stephen. I want to thank all of your audience tonight and all of the people who are going to read your paper. I remember the night my parents sat me and my brother down and told us they were sending us to America. I was fleeing a country because of the fear of religious persecution. I had to leave my friends, family, and the only country I'd ever known, and come to America, a country that I had never been to before. Often people ask me, were you scared? And my answer is, thinking back, I was a lot more excited than being scared, because I knew I was coming to a country that was going to give me opportunities, a country that I could work hard and make my dreams come true. And I've been blessed with that. I came here, I went to high school, public high school, went to college, and then law school. I met my husband, Darren. We settled in Great Neck. We raised our 2 daughters here in Great Neck in Nassau County. And somewhere along the way, I was blessed and fortunate enough to run for elected office. First, town council seat, and then New York State Senate. This country has given me so many opportunities, and I've never forgotten that. And there isn't a day that I don't feel blessed to be doing what I do, to represent the 315,000 people in District 7 as their representative in Albany. And I want to make sure that the opportunities that have been available to me are going to be available to others. As a senator, I take an oath, a solemn oath, to represent everyone in this district. Democrats, Republican, Independents, Black, white, brown, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, makes no difference. I made 5, 6 promises 2 years ago in my campaign trail, and I've delivered on all of those. I'm proud of my record. I went to Albany to make sure that we make the 2% tax cap for real property permanent. I went to pass gun safety legislation, sensible gun safety legislation. I went to make sure that we codify Roe and pass the Reproductive Health Act. I went to make sure that we were giving more opportunities for people to vote and exercise their constitutional right. I went to make sure that we give Child Victims Act and pass that so that every individual who was a victim of sexual abuse to be able to have their day in court.
Okay, we're running a little over, So,
those are my accomplishments, and I invite everyone to please go ahead and visit my website and to see what my record is and what I stand for. Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Dave, go ahead and please go ahead and give us your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna, for being here. Thank you, Steve, for hosting this. And thank you all for joining us. This is an important election, probably one of the most important of our lives. I am Dave Franklin. I was born in New York. I grew up in Jersey City, which was sort of a scattered area. I moved to Port Washington 33 years ago and really got that first sense of community. I understood what a community was all about, and I wanted to get involved. I worked overnights at HBO. I did that for 36 years. I was a union technician. I was a shop steward for 13 of those years. I was an RF engineer and an operations supervisor for HBO. I did that so I could take care of my kids during the day. So while my wife was at work, as they got older, I had the opportunity to get a little more involved in the community. I did a lot of great community events, great charity events, anything I could do to give back, because I really appreciated that great sense of community. As a result of that service, I was asked to run for police commissioner in 2010. I ran. I was lucky enough to be elected. I served three-year terms. During that time, we cut some things in the contract to save money for taxpayers. We revamped the administrative staff. We made sure that our officers were well trained. We were proactive. We trained them in diversity training, de-escalation training. We wanted to make sure that they had the best equipment and the best training. As a result of that, we were named in 2019 the safest town in New York State. A lot of that came with community involvement as well. We used to have 2 meetings a month. Not a lot of people showed up, so we took the meetings to the people. We went to the different communities to get their input as well. And this election has to be about the people. One of the reasons I got involved was to serve the people. I'm tired of politics, and the people I've spoken with during the last couple of months, going door to door, they have the same attitude. They're just tired of politics as usual. This has to be about public service. It's got to be about the people. I'm not looking to move on. I'm not looking to be governor or anything else. I'm looking to serve the people as state senator the same way I served as Port Washington Police Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Why don't we'll go right ahead with the questions. There's a lot on the plate here. I think what I have seen on almost every level of government and is the number one question, which is COVID-19. Both the health and the economic implications has become the dominant thing in our lives. Just to get started, we'll start with you, Anna. How do you think Governor Cuomo has handled the COVID-19 pandemic? How well has he done?
So I have to say, I remember back in March, we really didn't have any information, and the federal government was not giving us any information. But we realized that COVID was here and we were being hit. And I commend Governor Cuomo for his leadership. He took action. He came on everyone's channel and every day and gave a report as to where we were in this state and what we were doing. He didn't sugarcoat it. He said it exactly the way it was. He gave the numbers. He talked about the science. He brought the experts to tell us what we need to do. And each and every one of us had to take our part in it. I commend him for his leadership, but at the end of the day, I really think it was the residents of state of New York. Kudos to them. It was really their effort. It was them taking action and doing their part in bending this curve and flattening it. It wasn't because of what Governor Cuomo said or what I said. Leadership can give you the information, guide you, and let you do your part. I believe in science, and we tried to do exactly what experts told us to do and relay that to the residents. And it was the will of New York State residents that we accomplished this goal. And the fact is, the numbers are very indicative of where we are. We were the epicenter. We were hit first. And basically a guinea pig for the rest of the country. And look at us now. We're at 1%, where are parts of this country right now, other states, that their numbers are rising every day with COVID positive, and also with numbers of people going into the hospitals and people who are dying. We in state of New York have this under control.
Okay, Dave, how do you see what the governor did?
What the governor did, I mean, there was obviously some good points and bad points. As Anna said, you have to give kudos to the residents who really followed the guidelines, the CDC guidelines, quarantine, kept the masks on and whatnot. And I think that's a large part of our success. I think for the most part, the governor did a good job. I have a problem with what happened with the nursing homes. I have a problem with what happened with the fact that we said the governor said the government sent the Navy ship up. They built a hospital and that was unused for the most part. I would have liked to have seen a little more partnership. Okay, I think, and as I said, this is something we never dealt with before. A lot of this we were doing by the seat of our pants. But I hope we learn from this, and going forward, that we have a better performance. I think we depended too much on foreigners for PPE, for drugs and whatnot, ibuprofen, penicillin, things like that. We're all foreign made. I think that's something, if we're going to be proactive moving forward, we have to try to manufacture that here ourselves. This way, we're a little bit more prepared.
Dave, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll ask Anna the same question, which is, how do you think, because there's been other players in this, how do you think President Trump, how would you evaluate President Trump's handling of COVID-19?
Well, right off the bat, the cutting travel to China certainly helped. I know he was criticized for that initially. Making funds available, certain funds were made available to the state that were desperately needed. It's a tough thing. You got an entire country you have to take care of. It's still up in the air. As I said, there are so many things we didn't know that we're still learning about the disease. If you look at the vaccine preparation, 3 of the companies have stopped the vaccine because they have problems with the doses, and I think there's some side effects that have come up to this. So we're still learning about this.
But how do you evaluate his response? Did he do a good job? You seem to think that he did by saying that. So would you evaluate that as a job well done?
I think what he did was better than the way he did it. I'll put it that way. So it was a job that was done. As I said, it was the parameters were changing as we went along. CDC guidelines changed. So as I said, we were flying by the seat of the pants. I think he did a good job under the circumstances. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Anna, how do you think the president did?
In 2 words, epic disaster. I think if you heard Woodward tapes, White House knew about the pandemic. They knew it was a problem. Our president said that I didn't want to panic the country. The fact is, we need to give a lot more credit to our residents. We need to give a lot more credit to American citizens, because when you give them facts and you provide them with guidance and they know what they're doing and where they're heading, they're a lot apt to make the right decisions and help in the situation. We were in a time zone that none of us knew anything because federal government wasn't sharing any of that information with us. To make the matter worse, states were competing with each other for masks and PPEs and ventilations. The federal government has that capability to take that as part of their job and make things for the entire country, as opposed to have each state competing with the other state. I believe in my heart, full-heartedly, There is nothing we cannot do when we stand together. We could have manufactured PPEs, masks, and ventilators, and we could have been a lot more prepared, and we could have prevented 217,000 deaths, or at least have much lower number than that.
Okay. Let me just ask, I won't assume it because there's been people switching sides in an election. Anna, who are you supporting in the presidential election?
I am proudly supporting Biden-Harris ticket.
Okay, and Dave, who are you supporting?
Well, let me preface this. I'm a moderate Republican. I'll be honest, I don't like the ad hominem attacks, the personal insults, and I wish somebody would take the president's phone away. But I'm more concerned with building bridges than tearing them down, and that's what politics seems to be doing these days. If you look at the big picture during the last administration, we improved the criminal justice reform. We had a strong economy prior to COVID and the lowest unemployment rate in generations. We moved our embassy to Jerusalem, which I thought was important. A lot of people promised that. This president delivered on it. I think it strengthens the fact that Israel is our best friend and probably our strongest ally. I'm going to support, I'm a Republican, I'm going to support the president.
Okay. Right now we are, there is a major discussion in Washington over a stimulus package that I guess the House Democrats passed a HEROES Act 4 months ago or so. They're now negotiating, it was for $3 trillion. The Senate had come in with $1 billion, $1 trillion. The president called off negotiations recently and then called to go big. The Senate bill that's going to be presented on Monday will not have aid, $1 trillion in aid to states and municipalities. So Dave, we'll start with you. Where do you think that should be, and what should be done? What kind of package would you like to see, particularly as it pertains to states, because that's going to then be your job, depending on how much money you have, is to figure out what to do.
Well, the first thing we have to do is get politics out of this. This is why I hate politics. And it's both sides that are responsible and both sides are at fault. People's lives are at stake. These people need money. They're hanging on by a thread. We've got small businesses that are hanging on a thread, and both sides are playing games. I don't believe anything will happen until after the election because neither side wants to give the other one an upper hand. And as I said, it's politics. They're playing with people's lives. The people need the money right now. They need the support right now. If you can't decide if it's 2 trillion or 3 trillion, send out the 2 trillion and then work on the other trillion. Just, stop playing games with people's lives and get this done.
Would you expect legislation, would you support legislation if it didn't include the trillion or some number near that for states and local municipalities?
It's got to help the states and municipalities. You got to start locally. And, I'd love to know how much pork is involved in this bill. And if that's what they're fighting over, if they're fighting over pet projects at the cost of people's lives and livelihoods, then that's the problem with politics. This is why I'm involved. We can't keep doing it like this. We're doing it wrong. So I would say, no, you have to do something that's going to affect the states and municipalities first.
Anna, would you like to answer that question as well?
Yes. So my opponent talks about he hates politics, but he's someone who's ran for office 3 times prior to this time. He talks about hating politics, but you have to be a fighter. Right now, New York State is in a very, very difficult place. We need to get help from our federal government. I believe in the 50 United States. I believe in all of the states working together. New York State has always worked. We've been the giver state for the last 10 years. I also am here to say we were the epicenter for this. We were hit the most. We need the help from the federal government to help us to get over this. And we're not going to be able to do it without their help. This is for every Democrat, every Republican, every resident in the state of New York. Our first, second, and third ask has to be help from the federal government to help state and local government. We have always contributed well over what we have collected, and now it's time for federal government to step up and do its job.
If right now, New York State, and I guess you're well aware of this, Anna, faces a deficit of $14 billion. It's not clear if whatever passes is going to cover that. It may be part, it may be all, it may be none at this point. Where would, and you're going to be, so a lot of the decisions for the Senate and the state is up in the air based on that amount of money. I had two candidates for assembly saying it's either going to be bad or apocalyptic. So what does New York need to do in the face of this $14 trillion hole in its budget? Anna, I'll let you start with that.
First, second, and third. It has to be an ask from every resident in this state, from the federal government to come out and help us. We don't have the same ways that we can raise money as the federal government does. We can't print money. $14 billion is too much for us to be able to do on our own here. Having said that, we are always talking in our conference. Nothing is off the table. But we understand that the nation is suffering right now. Our nation needs our federal government to do its part and help us get over this. I don't know how else I can make this clearer. We can do our part, but it has to really be a substantial help from the federal government.
Where would you cut if you have to? If your governor has said that if we don't get this money, that he was prepared to cut 20% of state aid down to the municipality.
So,
where would you recommend we cut?
So Steve, those are really difficult conversations, and we are constantly having them in the conference. But it would mean 20% cut to everything, to our schools, to our police, to our institutions that help people who are in opioid recovery, to our safe centers. It's going to be 20% cut to everywhere. I would hate to be coming back and giving that message to my district, to all the residents who work really hard, some of them holding 2-3 jobs and paying their taxes, doing their part. And what they're asking now is for the government to do its part.
Dave, what would you, if you're facing that big a hole, what do you think, what should be cut?
Well, first, let me go back to something my opponent said. I don't know what politics has to do with fighting. There are men and women out there that are fighting, as you said, they've got 3 jobs. They're fighting harder than anybody else that we know. You and me both included, okay? Politics has nothing to do with fighting, and it's all about leadership. And when I was commissioner, it was an apolitical position, so that wasn't political either. Anyway, we have to do this as if we're not going to get money from the Fed. You cannot expect to spend your allowance and go back to mom and dad every time to get more. A couple of things I would look at, there's the the Hollywood tax credit. That was started by Pataki, I think, in 1984 to bring, it was a tax incentive to bring Hollywood production back. There were 5 companies that put in for it. Now there are 72 production companies putting in for that. I don't think Hollywood needs our money, and that's $470 million. It was just released the other day. There's a $100 million fund for political campaigns for incumbents. That's wasteful spending. If you want money, go to your donors or take it out of your own pocket. Don't demand it from the taxpayers. That's just wrong. That's a line that should be cut. There was also an audit that came out from the controller that said we have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of waste and fraud in Medicaid. Who's minding the shop? You know, it's great to sit there and say, oh yeah, we have great panels and we're talking about this. I'm sure that's a great answer, Anna, but it wasn't the answer to the question. You didn't come up with anything that you would cut. We have to take a look at this as if we're on our own. If the federal money comes in, then it's a bonus.
Should,
Can
let me ask,
I reply to that?
sure, go ahead.
So the fact is, those tax credits you're talking about for Hollywood, you do know those create jobs.
Yeah, they're temporary jobs.
Workers.
Temporary jobs. They're temporary
Okay,
jobs. If they're shooting for 6 weeks, it's a 6-week job. You want to talk about production? I was in television for 40 years. Let's go. All right, those are temporary jobs.
I don't think you have your numbers correct, as I remember from our last time debating, and your numbers are so inaccurate.
I looked them
go
up.
back and look at those numbers.
Look at the numbers.
About $100 million.
We'll go off and we'll fact check this, but let me ask you, Dave, do you think that the Senate, that aid should be approved regardless of the amount, but should the Senate, the US Senate, approve aid to states and municipalities? Because you mentioned about they shouldn't have to go back to daddy to get their money. Do you think that it's actually warranted in this case?
In this case, because of the pandemic, I don't think we have a choice, because we can't just keep taxing and spending. We can't keep putting the burden on taxpayers. They're already overburdened with taxes. We're losing New Yorkers at a rate of 270 a day, going to more tax-friendly and business-friendly states. So that's something that we have to address in this state. But in this case, because of the pandemic, I don't think we have a choice. I think the U.S. government has to, but we cannot go forward thinking that every time we overspend or something goes wrong, we have to run and get more money from mom and dad. We have to take better control of the budget and the spending. According to the Citizens Budget Committee, they overspend annually by $3.4 billion. We can't do that. Families at home have to balance their checkbooks. They have to manage their money. Nobody should do.
Dave, doesn't the
All due
state of
respect,
New York
I
by,
have to interrupt.
go ahead.
Dave talks about
Go ahead.
Dave talks about having people move out of New York, 270 people at a time. You know, Dave, those are numbers from New York City. Are you running for an office in New York City?
I'm sorry, is New York City not part of New York State? Is that not tax? Sorry, is that not tax money that comes to the state?
One at a time. One at a time,
Checked,
please.
I understand. He needs to let me, I let him finish. He needs to let me.
No, you interrupted twice, but go ahead.
The numbers he's throwing are New York City numbers. I will point out to you, during this pandemic, house sales have risen 9% in Nassau County. Those New Yorkers who you're talking about leaving New York City, they're all coming to my district.
They're not all coming here.
If you're running for New York City office or you're running for Nassau County office.
I'm sorry, is it not part of New York State? And while we're on the subject, let's talk about the $12 million you voted to give to Yonkers, when no other district got it. With the bullet aid and foundation aid. There was no increase in foundation aid for school, but you voted to give $12 million to Yonkers. Is that just because the Senate Majority Leader is from there? And the education chair is from there? It's Chair Myers or Stuart Cousins? Let's not talk about New York City or who you're working for. If you're working for the city, if you're working to move up, you could have given that money. That money could have gone to our district, and it didn't.
Again, he has his numbers wrong. Dave, you're entitled to your opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Are you telling me you didn't vote for $12 million for Yonkers?
I can tell you the foundation aid for the entire state. We brought back record-breaking numbers for our public schools.
You had zero increase in this budget.
Please stop, let me finish. I did not interrupt you, but you
always interrupt. Go ahead, but go ahead. I'll be a gentleman.
Dave, let's
Sorry, you're right.
I will
You're right. I
moderate
apologize.
and I'll keep it in here. So
I apologize, Steve.
Anna, it's
In
your turn.
2019, we got a 3.6% increase to our school aid for the entire state. Nassau County got 3.9% increase. My district got an 8.6% increase.
And where did
Those
all the
are
money go?
numbers that I'm talking about.
And where did all the money go? Continue. Where did all the money go?
Let me
Where did all the money
ask
go that you got?
Dave, if I can get in a word.
Sure, go ahead, Steve. It's your show.
Thank you. I'm being good and not using my mute button. Let's talk about schools, because there's a district that starts, you're in Floral Park, you have New Hyde Park. This is a large district that stretches a distance. In the state, we have a system, let's forget about pandemic and we'll talk about school financing, where some school districts, there's a disparity of $10,000 or $20,000 per student. In your own district, in the same Senate district, the Sewanaka School District will spend $24,000 per pupil, and Great Neck will spend $34,000. There's schools within a mile of each other where you have this disparity. Should there be this disparity in school funding between districts? And Dave, I'll let you ask if this is a public school system, and yet we have these very large disparities, in some cases $20,000. But should the state be doing something to narrow that gap so that every pupil, student in New York gets an equal education?
Absolutely. If you're going to give people equal opportunity, it's got to start with equal education. So if there's a disparity, it's got to be looked at.
So how would you address that? How would you address that?
Well, you'd have to rebalance. I mean, some of the things that happened in the budget, for instance, the executive budget provided for $688 million in foundation aid that was not put into the enacted budget. The Democrats and the one-party rule passed up $688 million that could have gone to schools that the governor wanted in there. That's something.
You think foundation aid should be used to make things more equal?
We talk about a level playing field. We've got to find ways to level that playing field. It's great to talk about it, but we've got to do something about it. And we always talk about taking from the rich to give to the poor as far as taxes. We may have to look at that for educational systems as well. We've got to give everybody an equal opportunity and equal education. That's basic. I mean, that's one of the basic things the state should be doing, and we are obviously not.
Anna, I'll let you answer that
He
question
talks good
of
talk.
the disparity between school districts. This is something that has existed for a long time, and in Nassau County, you have these very severe disparities. So what's your belief?
Yes, there are big disparities, but my opponent talks about disparities and rebalancing, yet he has no plans or any idea how he would accomplish this. This has been a very difficult thing for us, and we are trying to tackle it, but this has been something in the works for the last 10, 15 years. We just came in. I'm proud to say that once I was elected, I made good on my promise, and I went and I fought for more money for our public schools. And that's why I succeeded in bringing back $47 million to my district and making sure some of the districts that have been neglected for years got more. There is absolutely a need for us to look at this and to come up with ways that we can really find solutions for
You
them.
you have a way, because right now, this has gone on, and in your district, within miles of each other, one district is at 35,000 per pupil, the other one is at 24, 25. What do you think should be done?
It's unfortunate. We want to make sure that I want to make sure as the senator, I bring back as much money as I possibly can and distribute throughout the district for all the public schools so that every child has the best education possible. And I will fight for that until the day I decide to resign. We are working with our colleague. We are working, Senator Shelley Mayer is the chair of school K through 12, and we are trying to find a way to find a solution for this, a meaningful solution, not just talking about it. But in the meantime, I've brought back a lot of money for this district, for all different parts of the district.
All right, let me ask you, in terms of reassessment, the county, Nassau County, after 8 years, reassessed. It was found that $2.7 billion had gone from people generally in lower income, poor areas, that the burden was shifted to them from more affluent areas, from people who challenged their assessments under the system. And then the decision was, we're going to balance it, but now we're going to do this over 5 years. The Senate Democrats had, proposed, and I know you supported, the idea of a tax break for the people who would now be paying more, that once you rebalanced it, they would be paying more. My question was, the injured party were the people who have been overpaying. There's a 5-year period in which it'll be equalized, but they're still paying more than they should. Why propose legislation that would help the people who actually got the benefit of this system?
So again, this was something that the Republican Party had left and refused to do anything about it for 8 years. Refused to do anything about it. And I think the concern was really the destabilization of housing market and the senior citizens being priced out of their homes all of a sudden. It was trying to come up with a solution. Was it the best, perfect solution? Absolutely not.
But weren't the people who were overpaying being forced out of their homes when for 8 years they were doing that? And for the next 5 years, at a lesser amount, they would continue to do that. Why not any aid to the guys that had been overpaying for 8 years?
So I think these are good questions, and I really do believe the reassessment was not a product that we worked on. It was a product of Nassau County, and it should be really more addressed to the county. I was trying to be an advocate and help to the residents in Nassau County.
Okay, Dave, what's your, are you in favor of the reassessment and how it was done? Do you think it's fair that it's phased in over 5 years so that people who have been overpaying will continue to overpay, and people who are underpaying will underpay, but by a lesser amount until the playing field is equal?
No, you got to do the best thing, equal the playing field as quickly as possible. I mean, it's the little guy, the people low to middle income that are having the hardest problems doing this. All right. Sadly, the county has no money, so they're looking for any way they can to raise. But there's got to be some way to rebalance. And again, if you take from the rich and give to the poor, as is, seems to be the way of the state these days.
Do you oppose the 5-year phase-in that was?
It's got to be sooner than that. It's got to be much sooner than that. As you said, we have the problem that you could now lose more people because they're getting forced out of their houses.
Okay. Black Lives Matter. You're police commissioner. One of the big things to come from Black Lives Matter was police reform, but it's more than just that. They were talking about equity and housing and education. But let me ask you, what do you think about Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I've always supported the cause. I have a problem with the movement, because if you go to the Black Lives Matter page, click on the donate button, it'll take you to the next page that says you're donating to Democrats, all right, to left-leaning Democrats. So many African-American leaders have stepped back from this because of that reason. I've always been a proponent of equal opportunity. I was very fortunate when I was young My mom went to college when she was in her 40s, and she was one of the first women at St. Peter's College in Jersey City. All the students called her mom, and on Mondays and Thursdays, when my father had office hours, we had about 14 different students who would come over for dinner, because obviously when you're a college student, any free meal is good. But the opportunity I had was students from Africa, students from Europe, students from all over the place. I met a man, Damien Okabidi, who fought for Biafra and sadly lost his life out there. I had the rare opportunity of, it was almost like the United Nations at dinner twice a week. So I've always been exposed to different cultures, and I've always been colorblind. I think everybody deserves the same
Let me
opportunity.
ask you, do you think that that blacks are treated different by police than whites? Do you think that there is systemic racism in this country?
I don't think it's as widespread as people think. I mean, as I said in my opening statement, there are always going to be areas, and as we know, there are always going to be good cops and bad cops. I think 99% of the cops are good, and they do a good job, and they're fair and decent public servants. Obviously, what happened to George Floyd is unconscionable, and anybody who doesn't recognize that was immoral and illegal is just has to think twice. But one of the things I talked about as police commissioner, we were proactive. We did diversity training years ago. We did de-escalation training years ago. Of the, I think the last 10 officers we hired during my administration, 2 were women, 3 were African-American, and 1 was a practicing Muslim. I swore the man in on a Quran. So we look for diversity. As I said, we took our meetings to the people to find out what their needs were. We went to all the different communities. We went to the African-American community, the Jewish community, the elderly, to just get a balance. It was always important to us.
But what about the state of New York? Do there need to be reform? Do you think that there needs to be police reforms, and do you think there need to be other reforms in how Black Americans are treated?
I think we have to concentrate on training and make sure that the training is across the board, that all officers get it, that everyone is on the same page as far as operational diversity training and whatnot. We're all in this together. So I think that training is essential, and that's why I would never defund the police. I think we need to spend some of that funding on training to make sure that the officers are properly trained. Because they all come from diverse backgrounds, and sadly, prejudice is you're not born with it, it's taught. So that's something we have to reverse through primary education and also through training with the officers.
Anna,
So my opponent is saying about Black Lives Matter donations going to Democrats. That's a conspiracy theory that has been debunked. It comes from the right-wing media. That's what he follows, and that's what he quotes. All of his numbers and data are from the right-wing social medias that he reads.
Aren't you adorable?
I can tell you, I went to those peaceful protests in my district. The local protesters aren't representative of a Facebook page. These are people who've had enough, and they want their voices to be heard. They have a genuine concern. And going to these peaceful rallies, I witnessed for myself the pain this entire community has gone through and is going through. I would never, ever compare my experiences to that of an African-American family in America. But as someone who left because of a fear of religious persecution, it really hit very hard with me. And we took action. We went to Albany and we passed and repealed 50A. And despite what my opponent says in his social media, 50A is there for accountability and for transparency. It's to make sure that we send a message that every public servant is accountable. And I can tell you, in my heart, I believe the vast majority of people who get up in the morning and put their badge on and go out and make our communities safe are good people. They're there to do a job. They're there to make sure our residents are safe. But the fact is, we need to make sure everybody understands no one in this country is above the law. And everyone should be held accountable for their actions, and there has to be transparency, and that includes me.
Bail reform is part of criminal justice reform, and that took place this year, where no cash bail was, or cash bail was greatly limited. There was an adjustment made in April because it was found and it was argued that there were not enough exceptions, not enough leeway for judges. Are you satisfied with what was done in terms of the legislation, Dave, in terms of bail reform? What's your take on that?
Well, there were certainly changes that had to be made, but it was overdone. And the Democrats had an all or nothing. They went too far. You still have over 200 crimes that are not eligible for bail. Almost all the drug crimes, second and third degree robbery, third degree burglary, several domestic violence cases. Look what happened in Belrose. There was a guy that was arrested 4 or 5 times, was given a desk appearance ticket, skipped the appearance, and ended up killing 2 people before he killed himself. You know, this is a result of bail reform. It's granted.
So are you in favor of repealing the changes that were made?
I will definitely fight to repeal the changes that are made. As I said, certain things that have to be in there. Low-level offenders, the ability to pay. If you have a young perpetrator, a young first offender, you don't want to put them in with general population. That's how you teach it. That's how they become hardened criminals. The ability to pay. But there's got to be judicial discretion, and that's what's missing from this Bail Reform Act. They've taken the cases out of the judge's hands. The judge and the prosecutor can determine ability to pay.
And that's true. You believe that after the modifications that were made in April?
Yeah, that was just, they rearranged the deck chairs on a Titanic. They added a couple crimes that then required bail. But as I said, for the most part, there are over 200 crimes. You can endanger the welfare of a disabled person and walk out of the precinct. You can endanger the woman that was the woman that was punched in the face. All right, you can endanger the welfare of an elderly person. They walked right out of jail before the officer was done with his paperwork, before the woman was finished being stitched up.
Would you want to eliminate all the changes that were made starting in January?
We
go back to the old system.
I think we have to start from scratch. I think we have to work together, and that's the problem we have with one-party rule.
Under that system, 77% of the people, for instance, in Rikers, were in jail because they couldn't make bail. And do you think it's fair that because people are poor, they have to stay in jail?
Well, that's what I said before, that there's got to be something to work out. There's got to be some sort of a sliding scale taking into consideration ability to pay. And that's something that a judge and a prosecutor can work out. That was the whole premise of what I said earlier about first offenders or people that couldn't make bail, then getting put into a place like Rikers where they're with hardened criminals. They don't belong there. So we got to start from scratch on this.
Anna, you want to?
Absolutely. I have a lot to say, actually. So let me start by saying I'm a moderate, and I'm very proud of that. And everyone on both sides of the aisle believed that our criminal justice system was not working and we needed to make changes. And we made changes. Okay? At the end of the day, those changes went into the budget. And I'm sent to Albany to pass budget and to bring back funding for my district. And I voted for it. It was not a standalone bill. Having said that, I need to fact check what my opponent just said about the individual from Bellport. Okay? The fact is, he wasn't out on bail. He was on a parole. and the parole officer failed to bring him in. And really, it is really dishonest to say and turn this around and say this is a tragedy of bail reform that we've passed. I'm happy to share there are over 22 criminal offenses that are now have to be bail eligible that my opponent forgets to mention. And those were changes myself and my colleagues fought very hard and pushed back and got through in last April. And he talks about safety. Frankly, again, I would really suggest to him, stop reading and following the right-wing social media. I get my data from our Nassau County Police Commissioner, who said on September 23rd that crime was down 7.8% from last year in Nassau County. I get my data from USA Today and World News that says Nassau County is the safest county in America. I stand for those changes. I fought to make sure our communities are safe, and I continuously have worked with our law enforcement to make sure that we do everything in our power to keep our communities safe. I've done it before in the last 9 years I've been in office, and I will continue to do it moving forward.
Speaking of, we were discussing Black Lives Matter, police reform, prejudice against Black people, or prejudice has not been limited to Black people. Recently, we had an incident in Great Neck where people said that Chinese Americans said that they were being discriminated against with references to the coronavirus being the China virus. We just had yesterday, and we had discussed this before we were on air, that a Port Washington PAL clubhouse was broken into, and 12 swastikas were spray painted in the interior, on equipment, and on walls. Is there a rise in, do you believe, and we'll start it with you, Anna, in hate crime incidents or in prejudice in this area and in other areas? Do you see that on the rise?
So unfortunately, I see a rise in hate.
And if so, if I can interject, what do you attribute it to?
So I have to say that unfortunately, we have seen a rise in hate crimes throughout the country, and New York State is not immune. My district is not immune. Yes, we have seen those hate crimes. And I think the message really comes from the top. When we have a president that stands there and calls it a China virus, you know, he is the commander in chief. These are American citizens in our community. I'm proud to represent this district that is a very, very diverse district. Americans that are coming from all over the world, but they are American citizens, and these are their communities and these are their homes. I will always stand against hate. I've worked very hard with the Chinese American community. We've held Zooms where we've brought in experts to tell them and help them how to deal with this going forward, and that they need to report it. With regard to anti-Semitic, yes, based on all the information that I read from ADL, which is an A party, anti-Semitism has been on a rise over 60%. These are not new issues. And these are something that we can't forget about, and we have to constantly work and make sure that we talk about them and we don't ever forget them. Because if we do, then history repeats itself. And with that in mind, I've actually have had legislation that would help prior wards to be taken into effect to hold someone accountable when it comes to hate crimes. I've had legislation to make sure that we are teaching our children at school about inclusivity, about acceptance, and about all these signage that they might not know what it means. It is not something that we can solve overnight. We have to continue working at this, and we have to continue making sure we come out and say this is wrong. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah, I agree there is a problem, but I don't think it starts at the top. I think it does start at our level. And I think education is the key. We have to be out there with the people, which is one of the things we always did. I always did in my community, in community events. It was for everybody. I worked for everybody. We've got to go out and educate the people. You've got to start at a young age in primary education. And I'll agree with that on this one. Teach acceptance. As I said, prejudice is you're not born with. It's something that's taught. So you have to teach acceptance. You have to teach that prejudice is wrong. We have to look out for the bullies, for the loners, for the the people who hate at an early age, and change that behavior. You know, we have the red flag law that's in place for high school students and whatnot that are deemed a danger. Let's get them while they're pink flags. Let's work on this early and often, and to make sure that the youngsters understand that this is not acceptable behavior. That's something that we're going to agree on. And I'm a moderate too, and there are a lot of things we are going to agree on, but it does start at our level, and it starts at the young level. Speaking to the communities, you know, I've spoken with the Chinese community in Great Neck as well. I've spoken with the Persian Jews in Great Neck about better understanding and getting along. So it's at all levels. You can't just blame it on the top. It's at all levels, but especially at ours, because at our level is where you have the most contact with your elected official.
Anna, you want to?
So it's okay to turn around for the commander-in-chief to say, stand up and stand by? Is that okay? It's okay to say, liberate Michigan and really give them ideas, or the okay to go ahead and plan a kidnapping of a governor and killing law enforcement in the process?
No, as I said in my statement earlier when we discussed the president, I think the ad hominem attacks and the personal insults, there's no place for that. All right, but we were talking about
surprising because your social media keeps talking about how proud you are of our president.
No, it doesn't.
Which one is it?
I'm sorry, no, it doesn't. And then anybody that wants to look, it's Dave Franklin on Facebook or franklinforsenate.com. Okay, again, if you want to misstate, you know, it's nice to, I hate to put facts in the way of a good argument, but you're wrong. What I did commend him on was moving the embassy to Jerusalem. That's the only thing I said about Trump, was commending his move to Jerusalem. And I'm surprised you didn't either.
Let's talk a little bit about the policy. This is a little afield from a state legislator, but how we are affecting, and I guess this goes back to Governor Cuomo's directives in terms of having school closings and directing closings of certain neighborhoods based on spikes. Are you comfortable with what the policies are of the districts and the state in terms of determining what gets shut down and what stays open? And I'll let you start.
For me, New Yorkers have made such a big sacrifice, financially, emotionally, socially, for us to get here. We are doing extremely well during this pandemic. The pandemic is not over. We're only in the first inning. We have to do our part, every single one of us. I really do hope we don't go back to shutdown days. And that if we see a spike, we really take action and make sure we're doing everything in our power to bring that community that has the spike, bring it lower than 1% and make it manageable.
should masks be mandated? Because doctors say that's the most effective. Dr. Redfield from the CDC said that is right now better than a vaccine, better than treatment. Should it be mandated? And right now there's no enforcement regulation on requirements that people wear. So a small business, somebody comes in, there's no legal authority to arrest that person if a policeman were there.
So for me, I'm not a health expert and I don't play one in Albany. I look at the advice of our experts. And just as the CDC has told us, and Dr. Fauci and Dr. Redfield has told us, masks are important. It's one of the best ways right now to be able to keep ourselves safe and others safe.
Should they be mandated? Should there be fines?
Should there be a fine? I believe New Yorkers are doing their part. I believe that when I've visited a lot of small businesses and I see they all have signs, you can't come in if you don't have a mask. And it does cause problems at some neighborhoods. But the fact is, I think New Yorkers have been very responsible, and that's why we are succeeding at this. And we need to continue to do that and continue to do our part. Wear our mask, social distancing, washing our hands, and really just doing our part and helping each other.
Dave, your feeling on how things are being done with schools and whether we should toughen, whether we should make fines for people who don't wear masks?
Well, one of the things that I have a problem with is anytime there's news about an outbreak, the severity of it is never discussed. I mean, if 3 kids came down with COVID, if it's flu-like symptoms, and the stats are that most kids 18 and under, they have a 99% recovery rate, that or something along those lines. That kids, youngsters have a much better recovery rate. The problem is you don't know the severity. Everybody says, "Oh, there's a huge outbreak," but if it's somebody that's sick for 2 or 3 days, and I'll go back to your masks. I think masks are important. I think you're wearing a mask to protect someone else, and that's the mindset that you have to have. Your mask protects everybody else around you. I don't know about fines. I think most people in this town give you reminders, to wear a mask. If you walk into a store, there are people that will yell at you to put on a mask. But if you take the mindset that your mask is on to protect others, for the benefit of others, or their personal idea of what's necessary. But again, you have problems where you have asthmatics that can't wear masks because they don't get enough breath. So medical factors have to be looked at as well.
Okay. Voting. We've had a lot.
I just have to make one thing clear. All the numbers on the state website are there for everyone to check out. And it is extremely transparent. And I can tell you a lot of my residents look at those daily because I get emails from them. So Dave, please go ahead and check out the website. The numbers are there.
Well, I don't have to. I get the tweets. I know you retweet what most people say about it, so I can just read your tweets.
I don't retweet people. I retweet.
Excuse me? You
the
retweeted
websites
Cuomo
that have the
every day.
information.
You retweeted Cuomo every day. All right. And anybody can go back on your Twitter account and say that, because it shows a little RT when you retweet something.
And it's about information that we're giving to people.
But you just said you don't retweet anything anybody said. So now you contradict yourself. The point I'm making is, all right, if we've been at 1% or less for 3 months or more, obviously there's no major outbreak, that's going on. The hospitalizations are down. So the numbers, you can look at the numbers. They're skewed.
Are you satisfied?
Hospitalization is up.
Are you satisfied? Then should we be? Schools are being closed, maybe for a day, when somebody tests positive. Are you? Do you think that's being too cautious? Are we being overly cautious? Or should we? Or are they taking or are they following the right protocol?
Well, I think
I'll let you start, and then Anna, I'll let you.
Okay, I think the student should be taken out and evaluated by a doctor. Obviously, if the student's been there for however many days prior to that, if there's an infection that's already out there. If there's been any infection as a result of that student, it's already out there. If you see no other cases as a result, you base it on that. I don't think if one student is out, you close down the entire school.
So if there's one person, you say keep the school open.
Just keep the school open. Keep the student out of school. If a kid had a flu, you don't send him to school.
Do you think that COVID-19 is comparable to the flu?
I think it is. The science has said it has mutated to a weaker form. It's certainly not what was impacting us in the beginning of this pandemic. So it's mutated to a weaker form, and that's one of the problems they have with coming up with vaccines, because it keeps changing.
Anna, your comments?
Again, honestly, I don't know where he's getting his information. We're at 218,000. The number is supposed to get somewhere close to 400,000 by the end of this year. When he's talking about this is over, I don't understand where he's talking from. Okay?
I didn't say it was over. I said our numbers have been at 1%. I didn't say it was over. Don't put words in my mouth. As I said, don't let facts get in the way of a good argument, but don't put words in my mouth.
All right, Anna, you can continue, please.
This is a pandemic that we are trying to find solutions for and to deal with. When it comes, yes, children are being affected at a less rate, but the fact is they do get it, and they are transmitters the same way as adults are. So those are all consideration. And I think we worked very hard. I remember back in March, I was getting bombarded by different superintendents calling my office saying, the state has to make a decision. They should shut down all the schools. You should do it. We can't do it ourselves. What we've tried to do is really give that decision to the superintendents, to the schools, to the communities, parents, and teachers to make that decision. There has not been a weakening of this virus. And to think so is sending a wrong message. That's all I can say about this.
Okay, let me ask you the impact. Now, we're closing places, and we're talking about the impact of being health. We also know businesses. In particularly hard hit are local businesses, the downtown business districts, the guys, the independent operators, the mom and pop stores. What should be done for them? And I'll let you start, and then Dave, I'll let you comment as well.
Thank you.
So I have to tell you, I chair Small Business Economic Development and Commerce in New York State. And I wanted to chair this because I thought it was a very important chair to be. And I hit the ground running last year. I went with my staff and visited 9 different regions from Buffalo to Brentwood. Engaged a lot of small businesses, chambers, leaders of the community to come up with solutions how we can help small businesses. Small businesses make something like 90% of our economy. They're the backbone of our communities. They're usually our neighbors, our family members. When they prosper, the community prosper. When they prosper, they hire from the community. And we need to do everything possible to help them out.
So do you have
That's why those trips really resulted with a lot of different legislation to help them out.
But what should be done? How do you help?
So the legislation pre-COVID were different because it was basically giving them availability to put money away for rainy day, or availability for them to put money away in terms of wanting to expand their business, finding ways to make businesses operate easier, and if they have questions, have centers that could answer those questions and cut through the red tape. With pandemic, it has been very difficult. Our small businesses are suffering a great deal. I came up with a whole bunch of legislation to help during this time. One of them was to help them and give them tax breaks in terms of purchasing of the PPE. or in terms of restaurants purchasing equipment to have outdoor dining, to give the small businesses credit expansion, raising it from 5% to 15%, getting rid of the tax on PPP loans. I can tell you, in the last 7 months during this COVID pandemic, I held 4 different webinars where I brought in experts to answer questions and help people what to do and what was available to them. We have centers, entrepreneurship assistance centers throughout the states. There's 24 of them. In Nassau County, it's in Hofstra, where they help small businesses. They help people come up with their idea, make a business plan, move forward, and make sure that they succeed and help them every way possible. We need to do more of that. SBA has, which is on a federal level, different programs. I wanted to make sure that I reach out to all of my Senate colleagues, make sure that they reach out to their chambers and small businesses and tell them about all of these resources that are available so that the small businesses can tap into them and get the resources that they need. And we need to do more of that.
Okay, Dave, what would you, what do you think small businesses need help, and what should that be?
They need our help more than ever right now. I sadly have a phone message. I visited a guy in town in Port Washington, runs a shoe repair. You know, he does clothing repair. He actually repairs seats in cars as well. And I got a call from he was hurting because people aren't working. They don't need their shoes repaired. They don't need their clothing mended because they're not using it. They're not going into work. And I tried to give him a little visibility on my Facebook page. I tried to get people to go down and visit him. I got a call from his daughter today that she was in tears. What can we do to help? He's a proud man, but he's hurting and he's losing business. So we've got to try to infuse money into the small businesses. When you talk about the restaurants with the outdoor dining, that was something they were given a waiver on because you can only serve liquor within a certain blueprint of the restaurant. One of the things I would do moving forward is let them utilize that outdoor space they were granted and then have that put into their blueprint, expand their business a little bit, giving up a better opportunity to grow. We've got a frequent small business, and that's a message we've got to send out to the communities. You know, we have no problems letting people go into a Costco or a Walmart or a big box store. We've got to get the people back in the small businesses. They're dying as I go through all the districts and walk through the neighborhoods. I see so many for sale signs or for rent signs on small businesses. It's heartbreaking.
One final question before we go to our closing arguments of why each of you should be elected. Voting. We're starting to vote on the 24th. Early voting in there. Are you concerned that, do you have concerns with the voting system? Whether it be fair and free elections and every vote will count in New York? Anna, I'll let you start on that.
So I am proud to say when we got the majority and we went up to Albany, this was one of I believe it was the first thing we dealt with. And New York was so behind. We want to make sure every New Yorker has the opportunity to go out and exercise their constitutional right to vote. And that's why we worked very hard and made sure that we can have absentee voting, we can have early voting, and we passed early voting 9 days prior to day of election. That is huge. We have 15 centers now in Nassau County. And you as a Nassau County resident can go to any one of those 15 centers and exercise your right and vote safely. And if that doesn't work, then there's the day of election. It is imperative for us to make sure people feel safe and go out and vote, because that's the only way their voices will be heard. I'm happy to have been part of this. conference and to have been able to deliver for state of New York. Changes that were going to Albany with regard to voting rights. And for decades, it would never make it to the Senate floor for a vote. We got it done. And we delivered for New York State residents.
All right, Dave?
Yeah, this
what's your
is one
feeling
thing. Sorry,
on,
this is one thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
what's your feeling on the election system, whether this is New Yorkers can be confident that their votes will be counted?
Well, first of all, let me say this is something Anna and I both agree on. I'm in favor of anything that expands opportunities for qualified voters, especially during COVID. So that the system we have in place right now is going to work out well. There are some people that are reluctant to go to the in crowds. So the opportunity to mail in your ballot, to have early voting, so you can show up. I think that's important. I think that was a good move. I think the general concern with the public is just that there could be fraud, and that's on both sides. I'm not saying one side or the other is going to take a lead on this. I think, people have the thought that they don't trust government, and that's one of the problems we have with politics. They don't trust government. And as I said, I'm not pointing at one side or the other. I think both sides have a problem with that. There are going to be opportunists out there that may try to make a difference. But I think for the most part, it is what it is. We'll find out. I don't think we'll know on November 3rd. I think Anna and I can take a week off and come back, and the votes may or may not be counted by then because the absentees and the write-ins and whatnot. But it is what it is.
Okay. All right. So I want to thank you in advance for your participation and your frank discussion with us. And our audience for participating. I want to just mention that for those who are unable to watch today, a recording of the debate can be found on our website. We'll have a button there. It'll be on our Facebook page. It'll be on our YouTube channel. So we're up to date in terms of what the technology. And you'll be able to go directly from our site to the YouTube channel once we upload it. Once that's done. So anyone who's missed or your neighbors, you can send it. Anyone who wants to send it out to people, we're happy to send you the link to the site. So I also want to thank our sponsor, Northwell Health, which has been a long time sponsor of ours. So thank you all around, and thank you for those attending. The final question tonight, and we'll start with Dave, is why, Dave, you should be, why people should vote for you for the position.
Thank you, Anna, for joining us, for doing this. Thank you, Steve, for hosting, and thank you all the public who are out there and watching. I was very fortunate to have a strong role model in my mom. She was a single mom for the longest time. Taught me that you leave a place better than you find it, and taught me that it was all about people. And that's the attitude I'm taking. I've had the opportunity to walk through neighborhoods, to knock on doors, ring doorbells, and meet with the people in the district, all over the district. And they're very dissatisfied with government as is. They're dissatisfied with politics. And the numbers bear that out. In 2016, I think we had 57% of registered voters in the state show up. That ranked us 41st in the nation. And in 2018, we had fewer than 40% of voters show up. They're not happy with the status quo. They want to change. They need somebody who's going to represent their needs and their wants. And as I said, they're not looking for somebody who's looking for higher office. They're looking for somebody who's doing the job now. Somebody who's, I was a working stiff, just like most of the people I work with. I worked hard and long hours to try to make a difference, to provide for my family. And they're looking for someone who understands those needs. I think that Anna is a little out of touch with her constituents. From the people I've spoken with, a lot of them didn't know who she was because they had never seen her before. The people that had seen her thought she was rude and belligerent with them. It's just, you need somebody that's going to represent the people and their needs and their wants. And as I said, people over politics is not just a slogan, it's my way of life.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Anna, your remarks?
So I thought that was very cute. I want to thank you for having this event. I want to thank Dave for a very spirited debate. And having said that, I am truly blessed to do what I do. And there isn't a single day that I don't remember that. Our community is facing various challenges right now. Yes, business is not as usual. We're dealing with systematic racism and oppression. We're dealing with climate change. We're dealing with gun violence. We're dealing with the impact of coronavirus on our small businesses and our communities. And we're dealing with the fact that women's reproductive freedoms are under attack constantly from the federal government. I believe in my heart, American people are resilient and hard workers and want to do their part. And it's going to take all of us working together, sitting around the table, and coming up with solutions for our problems and moving forward. I ran for this office because I'm grateful for the opportunities I've been blessed with. And I want to make sure that the next generation has the same opportunities, just like I have. I take my oath very seriously, and I work with everyone on both sides of the aisle, with advocates and anyone who wants to be heard. People who know me know I'm only a phone call away and an email away, and I respond to everyone, and I meet with everyone who asks for a meeting. With some, I've met several times, not just one time. Having said that, we are blessed to live in this country, and we don't take our blessings lightheartedly. It is going to take all of us working together to get over this, but I believe we will, and we will come back stronger. With that, please wear your mask. Please stay safe. God bless you, and God bless this wonderful country we call home, United States of America.
Thank you.
Amen.
One final note, I will recommend that everybody read Rob Pelez's story that'll be appearing in this week's copy of your Port Washington Times and Great Neck News and Manhasset Times and our other 3 publications. So with that,
I promise to do that if you, Steve, will tell everybody to please go out, shop local, and make sure they buy local.
You don't have to. That's music to my ears. Because
Yes, I'll echo that sentiment too. Obviously,
those are the people that we serve in our community as well.
yes.
Again, thank you everyone for participating. Greatly appreciate your people's attendance and your taking part in this.
Thank you.
If I may just say, go out and vote. Okay, it's the most important thing you can do. If you complain, you have to vote. If you don't vote, don't complain. Everybody get out there and vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Good night, Anna. Good night, Steve.
Good night.